Hi, welcome to episode 27 of the Woke-ish podcast. This is Ebony.
And this is Zelma.
And we wanted to open up by just being totally transparent and saying that we are very tired today.
Yeah.
We're playing like yawn tag. So it's like one of us yawns and the other one yawns. But we're going to still try to keep the episode pretty high energy. And so the topic for this week's episode is the A word. Yeah. And by the time once you get to the what's being slept on segment, you will get it. But we wanted to keep it pretty, we wanted to keep you guessing.
Yeah, get you invested before you.
Yes. And we hope that we got some new listeners. So I wanted to say welcome to y'all. Don't know who y'all are, but happy to have you. And we are, of course, happy to have our faithful listeners.
Did we get more plays or?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so the people that have been here since episode 1, we love you. The people that are just joining us today or last week or whatever, we love you too. Those who have joined us recently but have gone back to listen to earlier episodes, we especially love you. Yes. Okay, so we're going to dive right in with our shout out segment.
Yes. And so the first shout out I wanted to give was to my sister Anna, who was promoted to clinical training manager. And the reason this is a big deal is because she's technically an LPC intern. So that means that she graduated with her master's in counseling. She took the exam and passed, but you have to do 1,000 supervised hours. And she's like a little over halfway done. And so technically she's considered an intern. So she would normally not be able to get a job that requires a fully licensed and person who's done with every step of the process. But they're giving that job to her, which is really awesome. And because she's so good at what she does, and she reports to one person. So she reports to the vice president of so she's in a nonprofit. And she's going to be supervising a team of 10 people and overseeing the entire clinical training department. So she's going to be the boss of people who technically have, are finished with their degrees. And so they should be higher ranked than her. Yeah. But yeah, she's really excited about it. It was really cool because she knew the person who had the job before, and she was worried that it would just be too overwhelming because it's a lot to be a supervisor, but also to supervise 10 people. She said that she kind of negotiated. So she has an administrative assistant. Oh, wow. She has another person helping her with special tasks, and she is getting a raise.
Wow, so, good for her.
Yeah, so shout out to her. Really, really proud of her, not only because she's my sister, but because, she's able to just do this already with not even having completed all the criteria for an LPC. Yeah. So shout outs to her. Good luck on her new job. And hopefully, she's a little scared because it's a lot. I mean, it's a lot of responsibility, but I think she can do it.
Yeah. She needs to teach me her hustling ways.
I know, right?
Yeah. Okay, so we also wanted to give a shout out to all the women and people of color who are running for office in this midterm season, as well as all the people who have contributed to making this the highest voter turnout for early registration, I think, in history.
Yeah.
And so everybody, people have been really eager about getting out and voting, and we are very happy to see that, and we want to continue to encourage people to get out there and vote, and to encourage their people to get out and vote, so that we can get the people in office that will make the changes that we want to see.
Yes. So Election Day is November 6th. But for many states, early voting has started. So check out your state. For early voting, you can vote anywhere. So it's a lot more convenient. But I think a lot of the polling places close pretty early during early voting. But if you're one of those people like me that might tend to be really busy, and you postpone and you're like, no, I'll make it in, the lines will be really long on November 6th. Yeah. So
even if you go early,
yes. So if you are trying to, say, oh, I'll leave, even though your work is technically supposed to allow you to vote, but we all know some of us have jobs where people aren't really that understanding. So you're trying to squeeze it in your lunch break or take a 30-minute break, don't put yourself in a situation where you're forced not to, cast your vote because you have to go back to work. So definitely try to go early so that you can just get it done and avoid the large crowds. Do it at a more convenient time and just get informed. And there's lots of good resources online. We did recently, a couple weeks ago, a podcast about midterm elections where we talked about where you can get information. So listen to that if you want to get more resources. But yes.
And just Google things that you don't know.
Yeah.
Like if you look to see earlier this week, after Zelma voted, she was telling me about this proposition that I wasn't aware of and like what it means and all that. And so it's like you want to, if you're like me in the past, when I voted on propositions, I just go to the ones that the person that I'm voting for seems to agree with, and so that may or may not be effective. If you have the opportunity, like if all else fails and you have to do that, then okay. But if you have the opportunity in advance to get informed about what the propositions are, that you can make sure that you don't, you don't see a proposition pass and you're like, oh my God, I voted wrong on that. Just make sure that you're doing your due diligence and just Googling on your spare time, what are the propositions that are going to be on the ballot this election.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we'll jump into our In the Know segment.
Yeah. So continuing with talking about early voting. Early voting has begun in lots of states. If you've been following social media or news, you kind of see some particular states being highlighted, like Florida, Georgia, Texas. And so I wanted to just kind of talk through some of the things that you may be listening to and hearing. That way we can just not freak out, because although turnout has surged among Republicans, Democrats, and independents, so among all three of these parties, there's been an increase of people who are participating in the voting in midterm elections. According to poll data, lots of people are saying that we could be looking at a turnout rate that virtually no one has ever experienced. So this is good. But because of this, there's lots of information coming out about people trying to interpret and predict who these people are voting for. And I think that this was an issue in the 2016 election with Trump, where everyone was very dead set on Hillary's going to win. She's doing so well. She's outpacing Trump. And I think we learned that the polling data wasn't accurate. And we learned later that it's because when people... The way that they get information about who you vote for is they ask you. So they'll call you or they'll text you or they'll send you a survey online and they'll say, who did you vote for? What is your political affiliation? Who did you vote for? And in the 2016 election, we realized that people were lying about voting for Trump. So they said that they didn't vote for him, but they did. And so early voting figures gathering from state and local elections are being analyzed using computer models, and they're saying using publicly available information like age, race, or party registration. So this is something that you can get from the voter registration. It's public record. So whenever you register to vote, you register with the party, and that's important because for primaries, you can only vote for the party that you're registered for. So if you are a registered Democrat, you'll vote for the Democratic nominees in the primaries. If you're a registered Republican, you can only vote for the Republican nominee in the primaries. So this is deciding who will actually run in the elections. So they're using this information to try to guess at who people are voting for. And so a lot of people, I was reading a lot of articles that said that registered Republicans were outpacing registered Democrats in voting. So more people who are registered Republicans are voting than people who are registered Democrats. And so some people were jumping to the conclusion that this must mean that Republicans are going to win because the registered Republicans, more of them are voting so far. But I was speaking to my advisor about this because my advisor is like a huge stats person, and we're talking about just assumptions and interpreting data and what can be some of the errors that people make. And so, analysis of early voting figures are missing crucial evidence, and that's that we don't actually know how people voted. So this could be like 2016 where people are just like, you can't make assumptions about. So maybe it might be that Republicans are not voting Republican. And so maybe there's more of them voting because they don't want to vote for the Republican person, or maybe they are voting for the Republican person. But it's just like after 2016, we have to keep in mind that not everyone who is a registered, say, Democrat votes for Democratic candidates. And I think this was even something for me. Like, I'm a registered Democrat, but for some elected officials, there was no Democrat option. And so I voted for the independent option. And I didn't vote Republican. And so just because you're registered in one political party doesn't mean that that's how you're voting for every official. So maybe you do vote for the Republican governor, but maybe you don't vote for the Republican senator. And so I think that people now are not as, maybe people who are closer to our age aren't as stuck to like, are more disillusioned about party affiliation and are not like, I'm a Democrat, everything Democrat, as like maybe older people are who are like, I'm going to vote straight party ticket. Yeah. And so as you guys are listening to the news articles, I know I got super scared when I saw that, you know, with all the hype about all these cool Democrats kind of surging in the polls and people, you know, all these videos of people like really backing up Democrats because I'm a Democrat. I was really sad to see that where I lived, there was more Republicans, like a lot more Republicans early voting than Democrats, which didn't make sense because everywhere I looked, all I saw were Democrats voting. And so just be aware that just because these numbers are coming in, we really won't know until election day when they count up everything. And so when you see surveys or when you see articles, one, think, how are they getting this data? Is it that they're calling people and asking them who they voted for? Or two, remember that just because someone is registered with one party doesn't mean that that's who they're going to vote for. And that's what we learned in the past couple of elections with a lot of quote-unquote underdogs winning elections that people weren't expecting. So just keep that in mind. Don't lose hope, but it's really important to go out and vote. Election day is November 6th, but you can vote early. I think it's a really great sign that we have such high voter turnout for not only midterm elections, but early voting. But I really think that it's going to come down to like every last vote. And so wherever you live, go out and vote. Try to be as informed as you can. But really, you know, voting is so important. And it's not just voting for the president, but voting for your judge. I mean, I voted for lots of judges. And I remember I used to vote for people just because I liked their name. Like, for real. Like, I had no clue. I'd be like, oh, Hispanic last name, let me vote for this person. Yeah. But now, like, I really pay more attention and I'm like, no, this is really important. And then getting informed about the propositions that are being passed in our city and all that impacts you. And so just take the time to get on the internet, Google some articles about pros and cons, who are the main people running, who you should be looking for, if you're a Democrat, if you're a Republican. Do you agree with what people are saying? And just, like, be smart. Yeah.
I think that was I don't think I have anything else to add. I think that was really good summation.
Okay. So our second in the nose story is about another immigrant caravan is heading to the U.S. So a couple months ago, we had talked about the last immigrant caravan heading to the U.S., and so this caravan is, again, mostly from Central America, actually mostly from Honduras, and they are escaping violence, poverty, and sexual abuse. Actually, half are girls and women. I think there's a misconception spread by the Trump administration that it's mostly gang members that are trying to get access into the United States. But what we're seeing, thankfully, through journalists that are actually following people walking with them in the caravan, is that we're seeing lots of children, lots of girls, and lots of women. Mm-hmm. So the United States and Mexico have been working to make the journey to the United States less appealing to Central Americans, not only by the rhetoric and narrative of the United States pushing this idea that the U.S. is not welcoming to immigrants, also by making it harder to seek asylum, by making it harder for people to even obtain legal immigration. But in spite of that, many residents of the Northern Triangle of Central America find the prospect of eventual asylum in the U.S., however difficult it is to get there, more appealing than the insecurity that they're facing at home. Mm-hmm. And so I hear people all the time say, why would they come to a place that doesn't want them? And it's like, that's exactly the question. It's like, reverse it. Like, how bad must it be for you to come to a place that you know doesn't want you? Yeah. Because that's the best option. Yeah. And so and then a lot of people are kind of asking, like, well, why do they think that they have a right to come? And so, just to remind everyone, under current U.S. and international law, asylum seekers from Central America are allowed to apply for asylum in either Mexico or in the United States. So technically, if people are escaping a dangerous situation, not just in Central America, but all over the world, because we see lots of refugees in Africa, lots of refugees in the Middle East, if people are seeking asylum, technically, because we're through being like humans, and we are allowing them to seek asylum. So what that means is they can't apply for asylum. They'd have to kind of prove their case that they are safer not in the country, not in their country of origin. However, the United States has already, said America first. So they're kind of rejecting the stance that we've had for like a very long time. I think think back to World War II.
At least like through our lifetime.
Yeah, so yeah.
This is what Trump is trying to do, is something that no other president that we have had in our lifetimes have done.
They said that since Woodrow Wilson. Yeah. Like, it has been, and that the U.S. was always the front runner of championing for human rights.
Because we are the superpower, quote unquote, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, if we're such a superpower, right, and we have become a superpower on the backs of people in these countries, namely Central America, the Middle East. I mean, literally, not even namely, all of the countries. Every country we have abused. Yeah. We are like our forefathers have abused and colonized, and I mean every other bad word that you can think of, in order to get to this place where we are. And so it's like I know that Zelma has said that, and plenty of other people have said I sound crazy. But everybody that's saying we don't have space we don't have space to accommodate these immigrants, it's like, well, there's a whole slew of Midwestern states where there's nobody. There's nobody there.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I mean, maybe some places are inundated, like California, New York, Florida maybe. But it's like, I mean, that's an excuse. That's an excuse. And the whole thing about, I've been watching on CNN, they have been covering it, and they'll do like little short interviews with some of the people, and they were like, there was one guy like that like completely broke my heart. Like, he left his family, his kids, and he's trying to, I think he said he was going to stay in Mexico City or something. So that's another thing, is that not everyone wants to come to the United States.
Yeah, they just want somewhere safe.
Yeah, they want somewhere safe and where they can find work. And so he's given up everything to do this, to be able to support his family. And how many of us Americans would be willing to move to another country for work? Yeah. Like, it took, not even just move, walk.
Yeah, no, yeah.
How many would be willing to walk to get a job? To get a job that's gonna pay you, what? Like $80 a week? Like, come on, like, we need to put these things in perspective. And I think that that's the issue, is that we sit on our high horse and we judge everybody else. But it's like, what would you do in similar circumstances? Mm-hmm. Would you even be willing to, like, so many people in this country are complaining about jobs and job insecurity and all of that, but to what extent, or to what lengths have you been willing to go to get a job? Mm-hmm. And it's like, you're complaining because you can't get the same cushy job that you're used to or that you think that you deserve. But would you be willing to, I don't know, do construction? Would you be willing to farm? Would you be willing to, all these things that you are claiming that immigrants are taking from you, would you really be willing to do them? Yeah. No, probably not. That's why you've been employed for so long. And I'm not even trying to judge those that have been employed. Technically, I'm unemployed. But it's like, I mean, and also, like, I don't know what I'd be willing to do once I finish school, and, like, if I can't get the kind of job that I want. Yeah. But then I'm also not one of the people that are complaining about immigrants taking their jobs, so.
Yeah.
There's that.
So the U.S., or mostly like the Trump administration, has enlisted Mexico to apprehend Central American migrants before they get to the U.S. So kind of putting pressure on Mexico, saying, hey, you should stop them before they get here because it shouldn't just be our job. Which again brings this whole like, I'm a part of a lot of Latinx Instagram groups, and there's been lots of heavy conversation about like the xenophobia in Mexico towards Central Americans, and how there's kind of like this hypocrisy of Mexico saying it's not right how they treat our Mexicans in the U.S., but then not feeling bad treating Central Americans like the United States treats Mexicans. And so Mexico has actually brought out the armed forces, and they were throwing, gas and pepper spray and shooting into crowds. Just really sad to see, because I'm Mexican, and really sad to see kind of like the hypocrisy of that country in terms to like, you let this terrible administration like bully you, make your people out as rapists, make them out as unwanted, totally belittling you, and then you turn around and kiss their ass, and like they tell you to jump and you jump because of what more can the United States do to Mexico that Mexico hasn't already had to face or endure? And what help is the United States giving Mexico? Like, they're not sending any aid in terms of the fight against drugs or anything like that. And so that was really sad to see. But so just some context of this particular caravan. On October 12, 2018, a group of about 160 Hondureños set forth from the town of San Pedro Sula, which in the first half of the decade was often referred to as the murder capital of the world. So it's not just like escaping. It's not like they don't like the job that they have. Yeah. It's like they literally are trying not to get murdered. In hopes of arriving to present themselves for asylum in Mexico or the United States. And then 75 miles and 2 days later, the caravan was more than 1,000 strong. And by October 15th, the Associated Press estimated about 1,600 Hondureños had amassed at the border of Guatemala. And a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, like, why are they, this is a mob. And it's like, if you have never had a family member or you yourself have never attempted to migrate on foot, then you don't understand how dangerous it is. Like, you risk theft, you risk sexual assault.
Except there are pregnant women.
Yeah, and so this is actually like the safest way for these migrants to get. So when I see this caravan, I'm not like, oh my gosh, I'm scared, we're not going to lose control. I'm like, this is a way for people to be protected, because they're literally crossing into country like Mexico, right? For example, Mexico they have a lot of different cartels kind of like fighting for
territory.
Yeah, fighting for territory. And if there's 2 or 3 people, walking by themselves, they're going to like try to exploit you. They're going to try to use you. They're going to try to attack you. But if you're with 1,600, if it's 1,600 people, they're going to leave you alone. And so I think like this is like their way of trying to get to their destination in the safest way. And they said themselves, like, we want to seek asylum. They're not saying we want to cross the border illegally. They're just saying we want to seek asylum because technically they're entitled to. And so I think that it's really easy to see a mob of brown people and to instantly jump to, they're going to take what's mine. But let's just take a minute to remind everyone that immigrants...
To remind you why it's yours in the first place. Why is it yours?
Yeah, and also to remind everyone, like, immigrants cannot get access to public assistance. Immigrants cannot get access to welfare.
Yes, like your taxes are not just going into their
pocket.
Yeah,
no, they are in no way. Like, the people who are benefiting from your taxes are the wealthy people who got tax cuts. Like, that's who you should be angry at, not to a group of people that are not going to benefit in any way from your taxes and will most likely contribute to the economy without getting anything in return.
Yeah.
And then for those people who are like, oh, but their kids are going to take advantage, but their kids are going to
are
are going to take our jobs, or no, the kids are going to take the resources that we have. It's like, let's just like not forget that. I think that people either do all or nothing. Like either no one gets in or everyone gets in. And I think that there should be like a better process in place. I'm not saying that we should just have an open border and let everyone go in, because there does need to be some way to like regulate, to make sure that people are assimilating into this country in the way that will make them the most successful, setting them up for success. Yes, I do need to make sure we're not letting in people who are criminals. I agree with all that. But I also think that just saying we're going to put guards with guns at the border and shoot you if you try to enter is not the way to do it, because as we can see, these people will keep coming. And why? Because of the decades and decades of, these are consequences of the historical, consequences. And people, and I had to explain this to people as to like, well, why again is the U.S. responsible? And it's like, the U.S. has participated in a lot of criminal activity in Central America in order to put in people that they deemed were going to be more benefiting to them in political power. So the United States would literally go to a country, engage in illegal activity, engage in like helping people murder people, helping people sell drugs, helping people sell guns, helping people create civil wars, so that they could have a guy that they thought would work. That would work better with them. They're like, this guy would follow us, would not fight us as much. Let's put this guy in power. How can we put this guy in power? Well, let's get rid of his opponent and like be involved in like actually killing their opponent. And I don't think that people like really understand how implicated and how
they do. They just don't want it's. I think it's really hard to admit that, you know, the stuff that we've gotten unfairly.
Yes.
You know, and I think that the only people that are really able to do that are minorities, just because, you know, it happened to our people, like our ancestors, you know? And so it's like, that I think is one of the, not benefits, but consequences, I guess, of having like a dual identity, right? So it's like, we're American, but we're also minorities in America. We are also, you know, treated poorly in our own country. And so it's like, we are able to see that like, with our dualism, you know, and that when I say other, like white people haven't been forced to do, because it's like they're American, but then they're also privileged in America.
No, I think that's a really good point. A lot of people have been shielded, and
it's like, we get it, but check it and let's do better.
And then also from like my fellow Mexicans, like, if you've been here in the country for a really long time and you're now turning your back and being like, well, they should do it the right way, or like, this is too much, or then I think that you should really like take like a look back and ask yourself who you sound like at this moment. And remember that it wasn't too long ago for me that I was in that position. And I always, you know, my mom and I, we always talk about how like, it's just the luck of when we came here. Because we would have left. Like, I think in any life, we would have left Mexico to come to this country. And by luck, I happened to come at a period where it wasn't as aggressive in making sure that people were unwelcoming. And so, thankfully, I was able to now obtain citizenship. But it's, you know, I came here illegally. I wasn't always a citizen, and we worked really hard to become citizens. And, you know, I pay taxes. I do all this, although I don't think that you have to kind of prove your worth as an American, but because I know lots of white people who are citizens that I would not say contribute to society. And so as you follow this caravan, follow the news, just avoid trying to feed into the hype of these people are here for bad intentions, these people are here to steal your jobs, these people are here to take things from you, because we have to step back and say, what would cause a mom to walk thousands and thousands of miles with her child?
And that's one thing that I've talked to a few people that didn't know that what caravan meant. And I do think that the language can be kind of confusing, because it sounds like a vehicle. No, like they're calling it a caravan because it's a collective of people, but they're walking. They're walking. And I can say that when I initially heard, back whenever we started talking about this from the first one, I was confused about that too. And so I just want to make sure that everybody listening understands that, like, these people are walking. Sometimes somebody will provide assistance and maybe help really elderly people in a car, or they'll be like I saw some people packed in a car, like people that had a hard time walking, like older people or women that were pregnant or women that had like tiny children. And I know that once they get to a certain point, they're going to try to get like on a train, but like not, we're going to go buy tickets to take the metro. No, this is like, jump on trains. It's jumping on trains, like some shit you would see in a movie. So you need to be like very aware of the lengths that people are going to get here in order to escape violence, potentially death, severe poverty, not like the poverty that you think about in the United States. Yeah.
So we'll definitely keep you guys updated on that. They're estimating they will arrive at the U.S. border by mid-November.
Yeah.
So they just arrived to Mexico. So, we'll keep an eye on that, but definitely, keep an open mind and don't just get your information from one source that kind of like frames this in a way that is meant to scare you, because these people, I just learn more about who these people are before you jump to any assumptions.
Yeah. Okay, and so lastly, I guess, but not least, so you may have been hearing about these bombs. So CNN has reported that so far 9 bombs, which were directed to current and former Democrat government officials, as well as media outlets, have been intercepted. Among others, pipe bombs were addressed to the Obamas, the Clintons, Representative Maxine Waters, and even the CNN headquarters. So what the media has been talking a lot about is that a common thread among those who were threatened is their shared history of being the center of verbal attacks from the president at various times. So, Trump has been very consistent with publicly degrading, like, just any and everybody who he sees as a potential, I don't even want to call it opponent, but anybody that has anything negative to say about him. He has gone on and on at rallies, called them names, tweeted, and, all of these things. And so it's like, if you, I do blame him, like a lot of other people have, because I think that he has incited a lot of violence among his base, who a lot of them he knows are just explicit racists, like the KKK, and so, I'm not saying that the KKK did this. I don't know who did this, but it's not surprising that someone who follows him has done this. And I think I even saw one of the pipe bombs, like they put his face on it, I think. So it's like they're being very, loud about how they're going about this. So while Trump and the First Lady publicly denounced this violence against the government officials, he essentially said that CNN deserved it. So he blamed the quote-unquote fake news media on Thursday for causing a very big part of the anger we see in our society, basically insinuating that they brought this on themselves. And, in a really passionate kind of interview, Don Lemon, just said that F the president, like, he's done with him. I don't think he was ever starting with him in the first place, but, it's outrageous. It's outrageous that you, in a way, are condoning attacks against the free press. Yeah. Because they said negative things about you. Yeah. And it's like, dude, like, no, that's not something that's, you don't die over that because you said negative things about the president. Like, that's not right. And so, and it's like, if there are continued attacks against media outlets, can we hold him accountable now for saying that, like, oh yeah, like it's their fault. So it's like, okay, if they're attacked again, like, you gave the go-ahead, basically. Yeah. To your clan of supporters.
Especially given the context of that murdered Washington Post reporter and journalist in Saudi Arabia. It's like, journalists are for real, like, being murdered, and this is an attempt to murder people from the press. A couple weeks ago, we saw that shooting in another newspaper, and so it's just kind of like, he's just such a terrible person. I really like. There's just no other way to cut it. I spoke to an older person today after I watched the movie, and we were just talking. We ended up talking politics.
Oh, there at the
and one of the things he said, he was like, "This country has just gotten so bad." He's like, "You know what? I feel sorry for you guys. I'm really sorry."
For the young people?
Yeah, and so, like, he apologized to me. He was like, "I'm sorry. Like, our country wasn't like this." And it was just kind of like,
y'all fucked it up.
Yeah, and it was just kind of,
we have to deal with
and he was just kind of like, he said, "I'm glad I'm old." And it was just kind of a realization that, like, man, that's why we need to vote. Like, we can't let these people just make decisions that are going to impact us when they can just, like...
And you may have seen that, like, satirical video going around with the old people, and it's like, that's real.
That's true,
Like, they're joking, but it's real. It's like, they don't care about us because they don't have to.
Yeah.
They don't have to. It's like, no, they want to make the country as good as possible for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And it's like, whatever happens to y'all is what happens to y'all. So no, we need to do better. Because
we need to look out for ourselves.
Yeah.
If this is not the country that you want to see, then you really need to do something about it. And how can you do something about it? Voting.
Yes.
Like, that's one way.
Voting is serious.
It's like, if you can't be an activist, if you can't protest, if you can't do any of those things, what you can do is take one day out of your life to go to the voting polls and vote for someone that you think will not contribute to this type of political atmosphere that we currently have, which is one in which a crazy white man is literally making decisions and saying things, and maybe 20% of people in the United States are backing him up. But it's like 80% of us are like, fuck this. And so we need to go out and show the 20% that, you were a minority for a reason.
Don't ignore it. Don't just think like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna, I'm just gonna turn my TV off or sign off Twitter or whatever. It's like, no, you gotta, I mean, even if you're one of those people that's like, oh, my vote doesn't count, what's the point? It's only one vote and da-da-da-da-da. Just do it.
Yeah.
Just do it. Because why not? Like, you don't know. That may or may not be true, but just do it just in case.
Yeah.
Okay. So with that, we are going to dive into our What's Being Slept On segment. The A word. Dun, dun, dun.
So I strongly suggest that you wake the fuck up.
Okay, so now for our What's Being Slept On segment. This week we are discussing abortion. And you may be wondering why. So a few things have been happening over the past few weeks that have led us to this topic.
Yes.
One is the appointment of Justice Kavanaugh, who, as you may know, holds very conservative views about reproductive rights, and he has kind of sparked a lot of conversation around Roe v. Wade and how safe that ruling is, and whether it could potentially be overturned or not, and then also the release of the movie Gosnell, and we are going to give more detail about what that movie is, and we're going to try to do it without spoilers. But I think regardless, it's still worth seeing. So I would highly encourage, I know it's only in select theaters, so I would highly encourage you to see this film. And yeah, because I want to say first, like, I'm not of the mind that, I don't know, because this is I don't know if this is everybody, but this is a very Baptist Christian approach to information, right? Which is that, oh no, like I'm not gonna ask those questions because like I don't want to know. But it's like, how can you stand firmly in your quote unquote faith in the religious sense, or in the non-religious sense, in your opinion or your views, if you just refuse, if you have those views and those reviews are solid just because you refuse to engage or understand the other side. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think that you should go see the movie. and you can write us and let us know what you think.
Yes.
Okay, so kind of want to give you some context about the current abortion debate. So, or I guess it's been current for a long time. So Democrats and Republicans, or maybe I should say conservatives and liberals, diverge on this issue pretty heavily, or pretty starkly. And I'm really conflicted about using these categories in the first place because I'm not a proponent of categories and boxing people in because I don't think it's accurate. Despite being a sociologist, I don't think that discrete categories accurately or fully represent individuals and their opinions and experiences. So you may have different views on many hot-button issues like government support or welfare, the military spending and war, immigration, abortion, marriage, etc., etc. But because of how we vote, you're restricted to choosing either Democrat or Republican. And although you can technically be conservative and Democrat, or liberal and Republican, we don't see that much because politicians kind of have to stand firmly on one side or the other to secure votes, which kind of forces voters to pick a side. But that's another conversation, which I'm sure we'll talk about in the future. But today, in talking about abortion, conservatives are typically anti-abortion or pro-life, and liberals are usually for abortion or pro-choice. So we have the Supreme Court decision, Roe v. Wade, the decision was made in 1973, which deemed laws that criminalized or restricted access to abortions unconstitutional, making abortion legal. But now, with the appointment of Justice Kavanaugh, the possibility, or at least the conversation about the possibility of Roe v. Wade being overturned has resurfaced and kind of reinvigorated a lot of the debate surrounding abortion and, kind of what do we think about it? Should it be this black and white? Should abortion just be legal, or should we have certain restrictions and things like that? So this week, I think it was October 12th, I think, a movie called Gosnell was released. And it's about the story of Dr. Kermit Gosnell, whose quote-unquote dangerous and unethical practices in his abortion clinic led to his conviction on murder and manslaughter charges, resulting in a life sentence in prison. So the subtitle for this film is The Trial of America's Biggest Serial Killer. Now, people are for sure going to have opinions about that and whether or not they think that is an accurate subtitle, or whether or not we should think about a doctor who operates an abortion clinic being characterized in that way. So Zelma and I are going to get into our thoughts on it, having both seen the movie, and how we felt about, or how we thought about abortion before and how we think about it now. We're going to try to give you a recap without spoilers.
Yeah, although this is based on a true story, so if you look it up,
if you know about the case, then it's already been spoiled.
And then backdrop, he's a black doctor.
I think, oh god, when he came on the screen, I was like, because again, so I should say, but I was telling Zelma this before we started recording, is that my boyfriend and I saw this by accident. We saw the trailer, but the trailer doesn't really give you very much information, and so I guess I should actually have looked this up. But I'm just like, how did I not know about this? Because I did not. And I didn't know what the film was going to be about. So when they started talking about it in the beginning, and then he came on the screen, I was like, why do you have to be black? Why did he have to be black? I'm like, this is so awful. But he's a black doctor. He's older too. I think at the time he was in his 60s or something like that.
Yeah, so he's an old black guy.
Yeah, so that also makes it kind of hard, But so I went into this without any thoughts at all because I didn't know what it was about. So I was completely unbiased in it, and I think that I have always considered myself to be pro-choice. There are a few reasons, but it's like whenever I was introduced to the abortion conversation, the people that were having the conversation and the people that were pro-choice were people whose opinions I agreed with in a general sense. So obviously that's a guidepost. right? Like, I mean, I grew up Baptist Christian, like, definitely not my background growing up would lend to a pro-choice, a pro-life view. But my political views, my social views lend to a pro-choice view. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not about policing women and their bodies. And so the fact that was fundamental to the pro-choice movement led me to opt into that movement. It's like, I don't want to police people's bodies. I recognize that there are a lot of different circumstances that might result in a woman needing or wanting an abortion. Mm-hmm. And I think that individuals should have autonomy. And so because there are so many different circumstances, I don't think it's right for a government official to play God, or several government officials who make up the Supreme Court to play God and to say, no, this person, I don't know, the Catholic view that like, oh, if this person was raped or whatever, this, like, God knows all and all of that.
It was meant to be.
It was like this baby was meant to be born. I don't think that that's fair. I don't think that, like, it's like you get to make that ruling and then you get to go home, and you live your life. All the millions of people that are affected by that decision, like, you don't lose any sleep over that, and so I don't think that that's right. But now, having seen this movie, I've kind of started to rethink that, or to actually put more thought into it, because I had never it was like, oh yeah, I'm pro-choice, period. Never really had to have an argument or a conversation or any kind of debate about it. Never put too much thought into it. It was like, this is how I think, and I feel safe with that, because there's so many other people out there that identify the way that I do politically and socially that think the same way. So it's not like I was going against the grain or the tide or whatever.
Yeah.
Pretty easy,
Yeah, and I think with this movie, without spoiling too much, they focus more on, like, later abortions. And I think a lot of times it's easier for us to think about abortions when they're, like, at 5 weeks, 6 weeks. Yeah. But here you're talking about, like, 6 months. Yeah. And so I think
the cutoff is, what, 25 weeks, I think?
It's 22, at 23.
23 weeks.
At 23 weeks, it's too late.
Yeah,
22 is the last week that you can have an abortion.
4.5 months.
Yes.
Yeah, 4.5 months. And then at this clinic, he was doing abortions even later than that.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's like, like Zelma's saying, the way that, as far as what I've seen of the pro-choice movement, the way that it's framed typically is that, like, oh, you can, or even the way that, let's even talk about capitalism and the way that birth control and the way that pregnancy tests are pitched, right? It's like, oh, you can find out at the first sign. Yeah. So the first missed period, you can know whether or not you're pregnant, and then you can move forward, because all these things are tied together, right? And then you can move forward and you can get an abortion. But nobody's talking about all the constraints to abortion early on. So for a lot of people, they don't know that they're pregnant right away. Yeah. Some people have irregular cycles and stuff like that, and so it's like, it may not even be something that stands out to you. You may not, or some people continue to have their cycle through pregnancy, which sounds terrible. That sounds like so traumatizing. But anyways, and so it's like there are a bunch of different factors that play into at what point, someone can have an abortion. And so if you are someone that is pro-choice and you're thinking, like, are you equally as pro-choice when you think about someone who finds out very early on at 3-4 weeks, or someone that doesn't get an abortion until they're 4.5 months? Yeah, where you can say what happens at 4.5 months.
Yeah, and I think first you can't technically know you're pregnant until 5 weeks. So like the whole missed and I didn't either. The whole missed pregnancy is like, for your first period, it's like, no, most people don't even think they might be until like the second missed period. But the reason why it's 22 weeks, it's because at 20 weeks, 18 to 20 weeks, you get the anomaly scan, which is where they do the full in-depth scan of the baby. They check the baby's brain, they check the baby's lung, the baby's heart, the legs, the arms, and that's where you can check for deformities. So before, as early as like 9 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, you can check for any signs of developmental issues in terms of Down syndrome. You can check for spinal bifida. You can check for some sort of disorder in terms of like with the XY chromosomes. But you can't tell if there's physical deformities until the baby's big enough for you to check, and that's not until weeks 18 to 20. And so that's why the law allows people to have elective abortions up to week 22, because by then you'd be able to know. And so those type of abortions are most likely, one, because you don't think that the child would survive due to the severe deformities, or two, you don't want to continue with the pregnancy with a child who may have like their arms and legs deformed, or may not have a fully developed brain. So that's why the 22-week mark is where it is. But you're right, at that point, you're like halfway done.
Which is, I mean, if you see the movie, that's one of the things that is addressed, is like how, or not even addressed, but it kind of pushes you to think about is, these things are not black and white. Like, there's so much gray area, but because of the way that the law is set up, it presents it as though it is black and white, as though it's like, all abortions are bad, period, or all abortions are good, period. Yeah. And we, I don't know, I guess while we shouldn't make decisions on, necessarily based on solely the minority group, all of these groups of people that access abortion are minorities, if we really are minority groups in and of themselves, if we think about it. So the reasons that, some women may get abortions are probably different than the reasons that, several other groups of women are getting abortions. But that does not mean that these groups are not, and their reasons are not valid, and it's like, I don't know. I don't know. I guess maybe you can talk about, as someone who was pretty conservative before, like how you thought about it. Yeah. How you used to think about it.
Yeah. So high school and the first half of college, I was pro-life. Like really pro-life in terms of, I was a Bush supporter because I was against Al Gore because I was happy when Bush won. And I looking back, I just I'm just like, that's another, it seems like such a different life ago, and it mostly was because of the pro-life stance that he took. And so I went to a Christian private university, and again, that was a really important, even the way we took biology class. So in our biology class, they would say, the conception would be framed as, which I still hold this view, and I tell people about it, and it gets a little cheesy, but I still believe that conception to me is a miracle, because the chance of a sperm and an egg meeting to be fertilized is really low. It doesn't occur very often. It's actually really difficult for that to happen. And not only that, but for a child to survive all the way through the first trimester, then the second trimester, there are so many things that can happen to those cells that will keep them from growing and becoming a child. And so already just a baby getting to week 6 is a miracle. Getting to week 12 is a miracle. And so that's, in my biology class, that's how they taught us. It was this is a miracle, and this is why it's a miracle. So it was kind of a mix of science, but God is already creating this person with these cells because everything had to fall into place for it to happen. And so I think I started taking like sociology classes, and with my sociology major came an understanding that I didn't like how it seemed to me that the people making decisions about abortion or about reproductive rights seemed to be people that weren't personally impacted. And so it was like, why are these men making decisions about it? And then, why are they making decisions about birth control? Why are they making decisions about abortion? So for me, it started with birth control. So when I wanted to get on I didn't get on birth control till I was like 20. And when I wanted to get on birth control, just learning like, oh, it's not free. Because it wasn't free until Affordable Care Act. But learning like, oh, it's not free. And oh, like my university's not going to give it to me. And just thinking like, wait, why are these white men at my university making decisions about my body? And then, I was getting scholarships through lots of groups at my university, and we had to sign a moral contract. And in that moral contract, it said we wouldn't engage in premarital sex.
Oh, wow. What?
Yeah. And so when I would be, and everyone on the board of trustees is like a white old man. And I was just thinking, like, why are these white old men interested if I'm having sex or not? Why are they interested in...
that those are the only people that should be able to go to college, right? People that are not having sex.
And it was... So that I was just kind of like, I don't like this. And I started getting, like, really, like, just kind of frustrated with how... because it was a Baptist university with just the Baptist stance on everything, and then just learning about, I can't even get access to birth control because the whole like, just don't have sex thing. And so from there, I just started getting really, really frustrated and started kind of questioning and thinking like, maybe what I've been taught all along isn't the only way to think about things. And then I think that, I started meeting people who told me they had abortions. And the reasons why they had abortions. And so I knew a girl who had an abortion because she was a teenager. And she didn't tell me she had an abortion until years later. And it was like, I understood, yes, at that time, you couldn't have this child with this guy who treated you like shit. Like, he wasn't going to help you. You're not even a citizen. You wouldn't get help. Like, just all these different, like, that wouldn't make sense for you to have. Like, the baby wouldn't be in the best possible environment. Now she has a child, and now, like, it's so different from her experience then. And so just thinking at that and being like, okay, it's not just people who just, the way that they taught me, which was women are careless. Women are just having sex with all these random people and they're just getting pregnant. And this is a form of birth control, which some people do use abortion as birth control, but they made it seem like every woman. And then it was just kind of like, well, why isn't there an emphasis on men and what men are doing, and only just how like women should protect their bodies? And so a lot of these questions mixed in with my major in sociology, mixed in with my inclination to like always be like, I think like really aggressive and really opinionated. And so I changed my stance at the later half of my college years, and it was just because I was just kind of like, I was just so and even in the sorority I was in, we took a fucking chastity, like, how pure were you? So you answered questions about like, have you ever done this? Have you ever done this? Have you ever done this? And depending on how much you've done is how like moral or clean or pure you were. Like these purity tests. Yeah. And that's what we did as an activity. And it was just kind of like,
what were some of these questions?
Have you ever had oral? Have you ever given oral? Have you ever received oral?
Have you ever nosy? Like what?
And it was just kind of like shaming. And I realized,
and people would tell the truth.
I did, because they made it seem like, oh, Jesus will know. But then it's just kind of,
Jesus?
Well, then it's just kind of like, then why do I have to write it down and put it in an envelope?
Yeah.
And so it was just kind of like, all of those things mixed together. So my experience with like a really, really, really strict religious institution really made me just kind of like want to run away from that as fast as I could. And then since then, it was just like you, where I was like, oh, women's body, women's right to choose. All these women that I like are pro-life. And it seems really like, I mean, most academics are pro-choice.
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 Sorry, it's hard to say this stuff over and over again.
Yeah.
So it's like,
and the way they frame it is like I'm anti-life because I'm
like,
pro-choice.
Oh my God. No,
Many academics are pro-choice, and women that I admire are pro-choice. And I do think that it was a huge thing to get legislative action to kind of say like it's up to the woman, because for a long time it wasn't up to women. But then with this movie, I think they bring up questions that we don't want to ask ourselves about, like, okay, given that abortions can be helpful to some people, what should our limits be on these abortions? And so when
who gets to decide?
Yeah, and who gets to decide? And so when I found out I was pregnant, I was 6 weeks pregnant, and I was so upset. I did not want to be pregnant. And so before they did the ultrasound, the nurse came in and said, based on your reaction, do you want to talk about, other alternative decisions? And I had always thought, because I was pro-choice, that I, in my life at that point, was not in a place where I thought I should have a child. My relationship wasn't where I wanted it to be. I was a student. I was not in, the best emotional place in my life. And I literally thought, this is going to ruin my life. I'm not going to be able to get my PhD. But I just, at that point, being a health researcher, I knew the child has, he has a heartbeat. And so I was just kind of I just can't. So I was like, no, so let's just look at the ultrasound. And so then I looked at the ultrasound, and of course, at that point, it's just a little blob. But when I heard the heartbeat, it was, totally different. I was like, oh my gosh, there's, a little heart inside of me, and I'd have to, kill stop the heart. That's death to me. Stopping a heart is, you're killing something. And so I was just like, no, I can't do it. And then slowly, you bond, and, you go to the doctor every month. You see the baby get bigger. So by 22 weeks, I actually had my ultrasound really late. I had it at 23 weeks, as opposed to some women who have it at 18 weeks. And I remember a lot of women were telling me, in preparing for the ultrasound, because I was really nervous, because I was like, I don't know how I'm going to feel because my partner's stance was, if there's an abnormality, we should get an abortion. And I didn't know how I felt. And so I just said, yeah. But in my head, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to feel. I don't know. And so a lot of women would tell me, don't get pressured into keeping the baby if you find something, because it really is about quality of life. It really is about thinking about, having to cater to a disability for the rest of your life. And I was just kind of and that made freak me out even more. Oh my gosh, I don't want to have to think about that. And so when I scheduled my ultrasound, it happened so late because my doctor was out of town, and then I was out of town. The person on the phone was like, okay, we're scheduling you at 23 weeks. That means that you won't be able to terminate this pregnancy if you find out. Jeez. So on the phone, just telling me you might want to go somewhere else, because by the time that we can fit you in, and that's only because that's when they could fit me in. And so I was just kind of for me, I was like, that's a sign. Maybe some other people would be I don't know. But for me, I took that as a sign to be okay, then whatever the results are, this is just what I'm going to commit to this. And then thankfully, everything was okay at the ultrasound. But I do remember thinking at that point, the baby yawns, the baby dreams, the baby moves, the baby it's just like so many things that the baby already does, where it's just kind of like, and then watching the movie of like these late term abortions, it's like, to me, I don't know. It also shook my stance about like, maybe I'm not just all the way.
I don't think that anybody, like, how could you be?
Yeah.
How could you be? And it's like, that's my big beef with the movement, is there isn't enough information being given. Yeah. So, like, my sex ed during high school, I mean, I went to a really shitty high school. My sex ed during high school was, I want to say 2 days in my health class. Hmm. So it was a week, but it was like, the number of times that we met during that week, I want to say it was like a Tuesday, Thursday kind of thing. And so it was like 2 class periods. And they didn't talk about, I barely remember it, but I know I didn't know all the things that there were to know about contraception. I didn't know how any of that stuff worked. All I knew about was condoms, and I'm sure that was from TV or like from movies or something like that. Like, nobody ever talked to me about it. And so it's like you have like people that are, and I don't want to make light of having an abortion or the impact that it has on the parents. Yeah. But people are getting abortions without even knowing what that entails. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I think that we should know. I think that information is important. And I think not just for people that have abortions, but also people that may have not ever had one, but have to vote on it or have to have an opinion for political reasons. Yeah. And so it's like, before, the fact that I had to really learn about the intricacies of abortion from a movie at 27 years old. Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah. And it's like, I think it's unfair, or I guess it's an injustice to push people to have opinions without being willing to give all the information. Yeah. Because we don't talk about the process. Uh-huh. We talk about, and so you kind of alluded to it, but basically what this movie does is it forces you to think about the baby in a way that we are not taught to. We only think about, like, it's framed as, it's a woman's right to choose. A woman's right over her body. Yeah. A woman's right, and it's like, we treat the baby as though it's not a living thing that exists and that should, it's hard because it can't have an opinion, but it probably would. Like, if you asked it, like, if it could communicate, like, what would you choose, life or death, Yeah. And so it's really hard. It's really hard, but I think it's unfair. Just like I wouldn't want women who have an abortion or would have an abortion to be silenced. I also wouldn't want people who necessarily have opinions or thoughts about it to be silenced either. Yeah. Like, I don't think that people that are pro-life should have to just be quiet, because it's like, oh, it's a woman's right. It's, they're autonomous and all this stuff. But it's like, we decided that babies are not autonomous. Yeah. We made that decision. Yeah.
After, so it's like, before 22 weeks.
Yeah, and it's like, and so it's like, after, so exactly, that sounds so ridiculous, that we can say, okay, well, before 22 weeks, not an autonomous thing. Yeah. After, like, who are we to make that decision? And I guess that's where I'm struggling now, which is, again, why I don't like categories and why I don't like the way that our political system is set up, where you have to be one or the other. It's like, if even now, this, my new, like, potentially pro-life stance is not gonna lead to me voting for a Republican candidate. Yeah. It's just not, And so it's like, by default, by voting for this Democratic candidate, I'm also buying into pro-choice. Whether or not I agree with it, Yeah. And it's just like, it's so hard and so unfair.
Yeah, I definitely think that my new stance is, I think that I still believe that women should have a lot of say over their bodies. Yeah. But as we were talking before, like, I also think that we should think more about the processes that we have in place. And I don't have the answers. I don't know what that means. And I know that the 22 weeks is, like, because
that's so late.
It's because of the scan. Like, that's when you can do the scan. That's when the baby's big enough to do it. Because I think if the scan was done at, like, 12 weeks, then that would be our cutoff point.
So maybe that should be because I think that, essentially what we're trying to get at is, like, because it's not black and white, we need to define the gray area.
Yeah.
So if it's, like, people can get abortions, if the ruling is, or the decision, people can get abortions or people can't get abortions, we need to have some gray area, like certain caveats. People can get abortions, but only certain kinds of people. Or not certain kinds of people, that sounds real crazy. Only, like, under certain circumstances or certain conditions. People cannot get abortions with these exceptions. Because I you know, okay, this is where the ish comes in, right? Because people, I saw this thing, this story that was circulating, this op-ed, and, you know, all these people I'm getting to a point where, like, I'm a millennial, but I'm not one of the newest millennials, you know? And so some of this stuff, it just pushes me to a point where it's like, damn, I'm not that woke. Like, I'm not that woke. But, you know, like, a lot of people right now are not vaccinating their kids. Right? Yeah. And they're not vaccinating their kids because they could potentially, it's not proven for fact, but they suspect that it can lead to autism.
And also because they're not vegan.
Yeah.
Which is insane.
Wait, who's that vegan?
Vaccines aren't vegan.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so that's too California for me. Like, I couldn't even, I was like, what? Okay, so because it can potentially lead to autism. And so I saw an opinion piece that was basically like, how autism phobic, basically, do you have to be to say, I'm going to risk my child potentially getting some fatal virus because I want to avoid them potentially getting autism?
Yeah.
So it's like, yes, life-ending virus over potential autism. And I started thinking, like, damn, like that's a thing, right? And people, I mean, I'm sure that the way that parents think about it, like, I'm not a parent, so I'm sure that the way that parents think about it is very, I could imagine it being very much like, I wouldn't be against, like, I wouldn't just completely just be done with my kid or not want my kid because they're autistic. But if I can help it, I want to have a kid that will be perceived in society as normal. You know, and I get that. It's like, you just want, you know, I'm struggling with my words right now, so I'm just going to say it. And for those that are listening, if y'all are woker than me, please don't judge. Okay? But basically, you want what's best for your kid, right? And so if you think or you suspect that these vaccinations can potentially have detrimental effects on your kid, then you want to avoid that. Right? And so it's like, while I don't want to say that people, like, force people into having kids that have certain birth defects, I think that there should be a caveat for those people. You know, like, if we're going to say no abortions, period, except for people that get to the 22-week scan and then find out that their kid will be born with certain defects do make it very difficult to function. Yeah. Certain defects, kids die at like 5.
Yeah, or at birth.
And it's like, is it fair to put you and your child through that? Your child through not terminating a pregnancy at 4 months and have them live for 5 years in pain and suffering. Like, I think that there should be something for those folks, and for women that are raped, because it's like, if we're gonna say that by getting pregnant you put yourself in this position, like, they did not. Yeah.
Or like if you're 13.
Yeah, if you're 13. Yeah, where it's like you. Maybe you put yourself in this position, but you don't have enough sense to, like, no. I think my stance got more complicated watching this movie. So I'm not like you said, I'm not going to be like, okay, back on the
conservative train, but definitely kind of like, why aren't we asking these questions? And especially being pregnant, it's just a whole new experience of, okay, like this thing's he's definitely alive.
Yeah.
Like, and to use,
doing his thing.
Yeah, and to use, and to use clinical terms to make it seem easier is not helpful. Like to refer to the baby as a fetus, or
Did you say earlier, evacuation?
The referencing how they complete abortion, how they do abortions, which is like they evacuate the baby from your womb. It's just kind of like if people are afraid that using different terms are going to change people's stances, then I don't like that either.
It's like you're basically like it's manipulation.
Yeah.
It's like manipulating, and it's like we're gonna manipulate people so that their emotions are not involved. But it's like this whole process is emotional.
Yeah.
Like they're gonna walk away from this clinic and be emotional. Like you cannot keep emotion out of it. And so I at least feel like I feel like people should not be misled and manipulated into getting abortion. They should know what's going to happen to them, what's going to happen to the baby that they're carrying. Yeah. So that it's like I don't know. I just feel like that's such a big decision that like you should have all the information. We wouldn't allow people, or we wouldn't be for people making other big decisions without all the information. Yeah. Marriage, job, moving. Yeah. Like, all of these decisions, it's like, okay, make sure you know all the information. But then when it comes to abortion, it's like, we're just going to tell you some of it,
Yeah. And my feelings about my pregnancy have changed. So if I, now at 7 months, how I felt at 6 weeks, I'm just kind of like, oh, that's how I felt? Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's really, or even at 4 months, it's just kind of like, so looking back, I'm like really glad that,
how many months are you now?
7. So really glad my friend was there, and I'm really glad that my initial reaction was like, honestly, my initial reaction was my mom would kill me if she ever found out that I had an abortion, because she just really wants a grandchild, and I would feel really, and so that is what kept me, but like being really thankful now that I thought that, because I honestly think for me, in my situation, I would regret that decision for me. Yeah. And I know for some women, they don't regret that decision. But I think for other women like me who may look back and say, I don't know if what I did was the right thing because I was so emotional that day, then I think that we should think more about something that changes so many people's lives. Yeah.
Okay, so, I mean, as you can see, like many other topics that are difficult, it's really hard to come to an opinion that isn't complicated. Yeah. Especially when you have potentially thought one way, for most of your life. And so if any of y'all out there are kind of listening to us and being like, oh yeah, what do I think about this? Like, that's perfectly fine. Yeah. I mean, luckily, none of us are sitting on the Supreme Court. So, because, I mean, there's that. I get to have my opinions, but I don't have to make decisions for other people.
Yeah, but what we thought about, we're not the same people as the 70s. Yeah. So I feel like our generation, like, we deserve to renew this conversation and say, okay, given that Ebony and I are not for, like, making it illegal, because people are still going to want to do this, what's the best way to do this where we're addressing a more complicated, now that science is advanced, now that we know more, now that women are just now that there's more, how do we want to approach this?
Yeah. We need, I mean, this is a different conversation, but we need people that are not dinosaurs on the Supreme Court. Like, the fact that some of those people were they, like, voted in the initial Roe v. Wade decision, like, that's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. Yeah. Okay, but that is going to wrap up our episode. So thank you so much for listening. Yes. If you have any thoughts, definitely feel free to share them with us. If you have any, anything that you think that we should consider, in this conversation or in coming to our own, I don't know, deciding what our own feelings are about it, if there's some things that you want us to think about, feel free to share that with us.
Yes, reach out at woke.ishpodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram at wokeishpodcast. Feel free to send us a message.
Yeah. Follow us on Twitter at wokeishtalk.
Yes, and we always try to give you little clips of what this week's topic will be. And so for all those of you who stay till the end, we hope we didn't scare you away with this abortion talk. But
see the movie.
Yeah, but Ebony and I just thought it was really important, and especially because, you know, we're both really transparent about how we're not all in one way and all in another, and we're both coming at this from different backgrounds and different experiences. So definitely we want to hear what you guys have to say. Hopefully you guys are having conversations with your friends about this. But yes, like Ebony said, go watch the movie, see what you think, and we'll see you next time.